What players does Utah need to add in the transfer portal in order to have success in 2024? Let's discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side. That's why I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, that mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So you can join your friends and download Monopoly Go now on the free App Store or Google Play Store. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's episode by Nate Carter, an analyst for KSL Sports. And Nate, when you were talking about the transfer portal for Utah football, it's something that a lot of people are always intrigued by. And I even just teased, right? Like, who does Utah need to add? What do they need to do in the transfer portal? But the truth is, Utah's fine. They don't need to add anything in the transfer portal in order to be successful this fall. And some of you may think like, well, so-and-so is adding this player and that player. But the truth is, Utah's in a really strong position. And there's a reason you don't hear the strongest programs in the country really adding much talent like that. Alabama and Georgia are they're in tier one for college football programs, right? But I don't hear Alabama and Georgia doing a lot in the transfer portal right now for a reason, because they're pretty set. Utah is in that next tier of teams. They're right in between that. You know, some people have seen Utah ranked in the top 10. Most people have Utah top 15, some outside of it, and injury concerns to Cam Rising. I understand the questions there. But the truth is, the best programs, they have their roster set. And Utah is no different to me. I'll go into specifics in a moment, Nate, but if Utah wants to find and add another piece, like if they find a great fit, like Alford from Syracuse coming over, that guy's a beast. I think he's definitely going to be an impact guy this fall like that. But I don't look at any guy in the portal or any guy that's currently, or I should say, I don't look at any thing that Utah is missing and say, well, if Utah doesn't land this player in the portal, if they don't address this position in the portal, they're not going to be successful in the fall. It's simply not true.
That's right, JT. As it stands today, University of Utah is favored to win the Big 12 conference. And that's what the roster we have right now.
Yep.
I do think the transfer portal is getting a little overhyped. We've had none of the 8 teams that have made the college football playoffs over the previous 2 years finish in the top 10 in transfer portal rankings. And so it's not something you're building a team with. It is something you can round out, smooth out some rough edges, and that's definitely an opportunity Utah has here. But yeah, you're right. I think season starts tomorrow. Our team's healthy. They're still going to be favored to win the Big 12 and make a deep playoff push.
Yeah, there's teams that have added guys, right? Like a Michael Penix and been successful, and Quinn Ewers from Texas and Bo Nix. Like those things happen, but that's the most important position. That's quarterback. Utah has a pretty dang good quarterback. Maybe a year from now, depending on how spring is gone, like 2025 spring is gone, and just what they see from Isaac Wilson as well as Brandon Rose throughout fall camp and then throughout the season. Maybe that's when Utah will be in the quarterback market too. But I just don't feel like this Utah team has an issue where they don't have talent in the transfer portal. And I've talked about on this show before, because DeMooney is hurt. Would it be nice to add a third linebacker? Sure, but I've also had people on my show, I believe it's Moose Bingham, who made the point of hey, or it might have been Porter Larson too, I'm trying to remember. Sione Fotu is a guy who he's had a year to get back from his mission now. So I think he's going to be even better except at the linebacker spot. And, and that's just one position that I named off the top of my head, right? I see a lot of people mentioning corner, and I understand why it's a concern, but at the same time, well, a slight concern, but I want Utah added guys. So I don't feel like that's something where I'm like, oh, Utah really needs a corner. Zamiah Vaughn's a really nice number one corner in college football. You also had a guy like Keenan Johnson who's played high level of football a lot at Georgia Tech. I think he's ready to go. And then Smith Snowden, I liked what I saw from him. I also trust the coaches. So if the coaches don't want to add anyone, I feel like they got pretty good guys in place, because the other players who have come through and been in the secondary, the starters, they've been guys that have risen up the ranks of the program and performed really well. I think Smith Stone's that next guy. That's not even mentioning the transfer they did add in Cameron Calhoun from Michigan, a former 4-star who's got a lot of talent too. Then you could look at another guy like a CJ Blocker, right? We were all excited when Utah landed him as a 4-star, and now we just want to forget about him. I think he's another valuable backup piece too. Same thing for the safeties, right? Jonathan Hall, Nate Ritchie, I like the flashes I saw from them in the spring game, or not even as much in the spring game, in the bowl game against Northwestern more so, right? And then looking back on a guy like Teo Johnson moving back there. He's had a lot of success there in the spring. That's what all the coaches have said. Once again, I trust Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw. I could do this with every, and then Gilman's the transfer they added already from that position too. Utah did most of their transfer work back in the spring, in the early part of the spring anyways. And I could go literally down every single position, Nate, which maybe I will do that if we have the time once you are done speaking. I will here in a second, but like I can go down every position and tell you why I feel pretty confident that it's set.
No, I love the fire, JT. I've been, I guess, pondering it similarly, but having a different outward emotion towards the transfer portal. I looked at the depth chart of the team, and I think they're in a good situation.
Yeah.
If a 5-star or 4-star fell off a tree and into our laps, will we turn them away? No. But are a lot of the guys in the transfer portal Utah football players? Not necessarily, as we've seen a lot of guys who have transferred in are already transferring back out. It's not an easy program to play for. It's hard-nosed football. It's really, that doesn't mesh with every kid in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and we can talk about some of the recent guys that did just enter the portal for Utah. Some guys who already entered, like a Chase Kennedy. Good for him for already finding a home in Arizona really quick. He's a really good player. The fact that he couldn't find snaps at Utah should tell you something about Connor O'Toole, about Van Fillinger. Maybe Logan Fano's rehab and recovery is going well too, right? Like this, just the transfer portal can be a really good thing if you have needs. Utah filled most of theirs back in the spring, and like tight end depth, Brant Keithy and the loads of guys there. Yes, the wide receivers. Utah does not have the best wide receiver core in the country, but that's not what their MO is. They're not trying to have the best wide receiver core in the country anyways, and they have one of their better wide receiver cores they've ever had on paper. So I understand, like, you know, the rich can always want to get richer, but you already got, like, this is already a really nice group. So I also don't think we should just get greedy and like overlook them and act like guys like a Money Parks, a Dorian Singer, Alford now too thrown in there, as well as guys like Lyons, a former 4-star you brought in, Munir McClain. There are lots of, even a Micah Pittman, like that's 6 guys I named that I have confidence in to be able to produce on the outside. I don't remember the last time I could go 6 deep at a wide receiver position for Utah and say like they've done things throughout their college career, or I have confidence in them in the case of a Lyons because he's at least a 4-star. Like there's depth there. We know Cam Rising. I know running back's another position like that, but like Mekhi Bernard has done a lot of good things for Utah. You look at guys like Mike Mitchell. He's the 4-star that's risen up the ranks. Utah's had phenomenal running back development over the years. It's another position where they've had success at. So I think he's going to have a strong season too. And there's other guys outside of those guys. Anthony Woods coming over from Idaho still. Like there are so many individual positions and players and spots that I could go into and talk about for why I feel confident that Utah is set there. If you guys have some of the comments, you guys can let me know. Like I know Kanias Vaughn, the UTEP defensive end. Yeah, he came to Utah and he's back in the portal. To me, it's not like, oh no, Utah needs another defensive end. Number one, they already added a guy from Utah State anyways. That's more so like, wow, Utah's really strong at defensive end, that Vaughn realized, man, I'm not going to be able to play here as maybe like I thought I was going to be able to, because he came up here and saw how strong it was. Utah is really strong at every single position. They are not Alabama. They are not Georgia, but they have talented guys at every single spot on their roster. I understand why people just get attracted to the transfer portal because it's the shiny, it's the new thing, it's what you don't have maybe, but the transfer portal and Utah's used it well. They already did use it well back in the spring, but it's not like this Utah team doesn't have needs. That's how I'll put a bow on this. This Utah team does not have needs. They are fine. They are strong in several positions. If you guys have more questions about that in the comments, we can talk about a couple of them more too. I think I hit all the major ones. We did running back. I did receiver. I did cornerback. We talked about too. Maybe there's one I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but I feel good about where Utah's at. Oh, I guess backup quarterback. Yeah. I've done full episodes on that before. With what Wilson showed, I feel strongly about him too. So I think we're okay there. Nate, did you have anything you wanted to add on this before we move on?
No, I think running back is a popular on everybody's wish list. Is we saw a lot of guys who entered the transfer portal and just not end up in a Utes uniform. This team, I don't think, is going to have a Zach Moss this year. Quentin Ganther.
That's okay.
And that's Andy Ludwig will be able to game plan perfectly fine without it. We're going to have athletes back there that are going to be able to block, able to scramble, able to run when Coach Whittingham wants to run. So, yeah, I think as much as everyone has a running back on their wish list, if it happens, great. I don't see it happening, and I'm not worried about it.
Got a guy in Woods who's rushed for over 1,000 yards. You got strong guys in the program who were 4-star recruits for a reason that I think are set to take off too. And Mekhi Bernard was already part of a 1-2 punch that helped this team get to a Pac-12 championship, not once, but twice. Bernard was a key cog in both of those team seasons too. So yes, I would love it if the perfect running back, an ideal world, like if you're trying to build a super team, of course you would put Zach Moss on this team over the other guys, but I don't see a back out there that's going to do that. And nor if I'm Utah, like I like what we have in house. They've won it before without Zach Moss. Yes, they had Tavion Thomas, but they have other guys in house that are capable of doing that. I know Coley, the center, transferred. I think that's the very last one I'll go into. It sounds like that's because of the competition and that how good Johnny Mae has been, or some of these other guys have been. So like, that's another one where I just have confidence in this coaching staff and everything. And I'm excited to see it all play out this fall too. But we mentioned there really is only so many names to even discuss at this point. We will mention a few of them diving into the transfer portal a little deeper and mention maybe that one or two name that Utah would be worth for them to add. Maybe not so as much for this fall where I think Utah's set, but maybe even more so for the 2025 season. I think that is worth discussing. We will be diving into that in one moment. But first, want to talk to you all about our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA, NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. And how many great playoff shots are there? I mean, look at the series we have between the Knicks and 76ers. Is Joel Embiid going to have an insane Game 5 performance coming up here to bring it back to Philadelphia, potentially? Looking across the other ones, is Milwaukee, can they hang with Indiana? It doesn't seem like it with the stars that they have out too. By the time we're recording this, the Lakers haven't been swept yet. So if they somehow win a game in Denver, do they have a chance to extend it to 7? Or as a Timberwolves fan, I'm fired up to see Denver take on Minnesota in a playoff series. So many fun and exciting matchups. And that's just in the NBA. That's not talking about the NHL playoffs. And of course, we got MLB in the full swing of things. So make sure you guys head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Nate, talking about specific players in the transfer portal. As I just went on my nice long and heated rant, I got a little bit of red in my face. I think you see, I got to calm down a little bit, drink some water. Hopefully this will mellow me out a little bit, Nate. But there is a guy that Utah has been now rumored and attached to, Kevin Borba, friend of the show, Fan Nation, All Utes, creator, put out an article talking about how Utah is a team that could potentially be looking at defensive back Cormani McClain. And this is a guy that I know he has the potential to be really good. You know, he's a former 5-star guy, as Josh Newberg of On3 notes in Kevin Borba's piece. And there's a chance that he could end up at Utah too. I just have a hard time believing, and we didn't even talk about this in the last segment, it's not easy to pick up everything that Utah does. So I have a hard time also believing that some guy is just going to, even a guy, I think Levi Damuni was an all Pac-12 caliber linebacker. I think he actually been honored for that in like the 22 fall. He came up here in 23 and was behind Lander Barton and Karene Reed. It's hard to play on this team, just walk in even for a couple of months and then just start right away. So even a guy as talented as this former 5-star defensive back in a guy like McClain, I think it'd be a good ad. I would expect more from him in 25. If he is a reserve and maybe there's an injury, but like I said, even if there is an injury, I already like a Cameron Calhoun and a CJ Blocker guys you have in the system. So if you just want it for the sake of getting stronger, I get adding him and I think it makes sense, but this is a move that would more so get me excited for 2025 than 2024.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously speed, height, agility. McClain would be an amazing athlete to have on the program. We don't really know what's happening behind closed doors on why he wanted to leave Colorado. Yeah. Obviously, bit of a
not the only one.
Might be a tough. Yeah. We've seen kind of a carousel going around as players coming in and out of the transfer portal heavily in Colorado. And maybe it just wasn't a good fit for him, and Utah would be a great landing spot for him. Obviously, the the measurables are great. It'd be up to the coaching staff, Coach Shaw, to be able to sit down with him and see if he could help our team.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one to look at too. I kind of went through and looked in the portal, just see a couple guys. I'm like, okay, which ones would potentially make sense for Utah or get me excited? One guy I noted was like a Jeremiah Beasley, a linebacker, coming over from Michigan. That's a former 4-star. It's exactly the type of player I talked about in that third linebacker spot. I feel fine if Utah doesn't add one. I don't feel like it moves the needle for their championship hopes because of the guys they already had there, but just for the sake of getting stronger, I think he could make sense. A guy like Oklahoma's Shane Whitter, I think, is another, or Whittier, excuse me. I'm actually not 100% sure how his last name is pronounced, so I apologize, Shane. But I think that's another guy there too, where it's like, okay, if you wanted to add a linebacker in that spot, that's one that makes sense to me. Some cornerbacks, put a guy like Kalen Moore, a Cal transfer too. Looks like he's just got some length, some talent there. So another potential developmental guy to me, as well as if you're going to talk about a guy like Sierra Wright coming over from USC, long, good potential, long-term. I trust what a guy like Sharif Shaw can do with him, maybe contribute a little bit in the fall, but would more so be a guy that looks to be one of the starters in 2025, assuming a guy like Johnson, and then as well as of course, Maya Vaughn will definitely be departing. So we'll see the shakeups here and everything that goes there. So there's a couple of offensive positions I'll talk about in a moment too, Nate, but were there any defensive guys that caught your eye in the portal? Like, oh, if Utah were to add him, that would be cool.
Not particularly. It just gets so tough since it's always moving so fast. A lot of these guys are entering the portal. I know we don't have official tampering
I'm sure a lot of you were
rules.
like me and didn't realize Vaughn was in the portal until I jumped on this show right before with Nate, and Nate reminded me, he's like, hey, did you see Vaughn in the portal? And I was like, oh my gosh, what? Like it's just it's difficult to keep track of this because these guys also like individually enter the portal. Like it's not like the university tweets out like so-and-so is in the portal, because how could you? There's so much crazy movement and constant the changes that are going on. So continue. I think you're absolutely right. We talk about how much madness this can be.
No, and I think a lot of players have a plan when they're entering the portal. We don't have an outline tampering rules here, but a lot of guys are entering the portal with a plan in mind of somewhere they would like to go. So it's kind of tough to see that transfer portal list and be able to treat it as a menu. A lot of guys already have their game plan already set up.
Exactly. So a few more names. I wanted to get a new offensive side of the ball. There's a Boise State transfer as well. Favor is his first name. If I attempt his last name, I'm just going to get it wrong. So sorry, Favor. But he's a guy coming over from Boise State that I look at like, okay, once again, I don't think he's going to start because it's just that is the, like, if you were to say, what's the toughest position, maybe outside of quarterback to start at right away for Utah, I'd probably go offensive line because of all the intricacies. Like, I can't even remember the last time Utah added a transfer in the spring and he went through spring ball and then like started in the fall. Maybe there's one you guys can bring up. Bama Laseni. I don't remember how long he was here before he broke out, obviously in the 22 season. So maybe that was the one example of it, but Bam was a monster. Like, so that's where you also have to be a certain level of just have those physical athletic traits that enable you to be able to do that kind of thing too. So that's what I like about a guy like Favor. And Anthony Smith coming over from Iowa State, got in another Big 12 guy. That's the guy up front that I think would make a lot of sense for Utah once again for next year. But Nate, were there any offensive linemen that intrigued you just because Utah did lose out on Coley?
Yeah. Coley leaves. He actually went to Texas A&M, which put a bit of a roster carousel as Bryce Foster entered the the transfer portal. And so that would be an interesting swap back. Big body, snapped the ball for Texas A&M last year. Could be kind of that depth as he's not as polished of a blocker, or else he wouldn't be in the transfer portal right now.
Exactly. So moving on from there, last one for me is receivers. Jaden Moore from USC, and another guy in a Jason Doss. Like, just two really talented wideouts where I'm like, okay, once Money Parks and Dorian Singer, maybe Alford too, like these are all guys that could be gone a year from now. Micah Pittman definitely will too. Manir McClain, another one who could be. Like, those are future pieces I'd like to add. So if we want to talk about the transfer portal for getting ahead on 2025, I have no idea what just happened to my voice, Nate, but we're going to push on. Those are ones I think that could make some sense to me. But outside of that, like I said, to me, I feel good with the guys Utah has in house right now. If you want to add some added depth and transfers, that makes sense, and try to get in front of the receiver losses that you could potentially suffer. I understand that part of things, but I'm not feeling a big rush to add anyone. Were there any other offensive players or just any players in general that through the portal you thought it might be worth Utah kicking the tires on?
One quarterback I did have on my list that I forgot about was Tacario Davis out of
Okay.
Arizona. Big 6'4" body. We saw Arizona play real tough football last year. And so if I am picking kind of based on programs that we've seen that we've liked the style of, that's where I'd be kind of digging is similar hard-nosed programs.
Yeah, I think that one makes a lot of sense. So, going to be interesting to see what the coaches do. Honestly, the coaches have earned my trust. Won back-to-back Pac-12 championships, lost so much last year, still mustered 8 wins, only 4 regular season losses. I know the bowl game wasn't great, but once again, like I know it's been a thing for Utah's bowl games haven't been great. I'd much rather enjoy the regular season and conference championship success than also being like, oh, wow, we're not great in bowl games. Like, I mean, that's not as big a concern because then that is where Utah loses a lot of their guys and their depth gets tested there. And then what do? They have another full year to develop a lot of those underclassmen, as well as they find guys through the spring transfer portal, which the first go around of the portal is always more important to the best teams, in my opinion, anyways. So, yeah, but always an interesting conversation around the portal. I would love to hear from you guys below. Do you think I am way off and that Utah needs to add this, this, and this? Are there guys in the future that intrigue you? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. Want to talk about a team that's currently in season, and that's the Utah baseball team, who, believe it or not, and I did not believe it until it was tweeted out, I will be honest. They are actually tied for first in the Pac-12, and they are technically like number 1 in the rankings. I don't know how it exactly works because right now, they have more overall wins than Arizona. So I think if it ended today, they would be the top overall seed. Either way, just seeing Utah at the top of the Pac-12 baseball standings is something that absolutely shocked me and just really excited me about what they've been able to do so far this season. So we got to talk about their continued success and gradual growth over the course of the year. We'll be diving into that in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about our friends at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you also unlock. And there's so much more. You can get unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the board with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton, including their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot Pinocchio machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multiplayers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Go get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. All right, Nate, closing this one out. Let's talk about this Utah baseball team, who is currently 14-7 in Pac-12 play, the last season of Pac-12 play, RIP, and 29-13 overall. I mean, what Coach Henderson and this team are doing right now has been awesome to watch. I mean, you got guys like Kai Roberts and TJ Clarkson who have been through a lot with this program still there too, as well as guys like Jackson Core now, who have been a really part of this successful turnaround that Utah baseball is going through. I mean, they just swept UCLA. That's really exciting to look and see this Utah team at the top of the Pac-12 standings is something that I'm just fired up about. Congrats to all the players and Coach Henderson, what they've been able to do this year to so fired up for this Utah baseball team because you just seemed like they were far off from this. Like I know last year there were positive steps and signs and they got some tough games ahead. I'm not saying they'll even necessarily finish there, but the fact that they are at the top right now, even a couple months into the season, is a huge testament to their performance so far on the year, Nate.
Yeah, for sure. Big sweep over UCLA, first time in the franchise or in the program's history. So very excited for them. Looks like they're building up a lot of confidence too, which they still have Oregon and Arizona on the schedule coming up, which is going to be a real test of the strength of this program as it is. But things are turning up for them. Looks like they're sniffing the USA Today's coaches poll, receiving votes, but not quite in the top 25 yet.
Yep, it's an awesome for them to see. You're right. Them landing at 25 and the writers and hopefully soon getting actually ranked 2 would be something incredible to see too. So it'll be interesting to see how the Utah baseball team continues to progress. Hats off to Coach Henderson and all the squad, guys like Kyle Robertson, TJ Clarkson, who I still remember calling their games. Like I said, that's just, so it's crazy to me to see them still out there and contributing for this team, and something that definitely has me fired up too about it, Nate. But always fun to see with Utah, everything's going on with Utah. Make sure you guys keep it at Locked On Utes for more Utah information. Nate, always great having you on. If you guys want to give Nate a follow on X, make sure you follow him at CrazyN8 on X. Nate, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, JT. Look forward to the rest of the offseason until we get to watch kickoff again.
Yeah, we got a long time to go, so I'm glad you're looking forward to the rest of the offseason. There are parts of the offseason I look forward to, but dang it if I don't wish it was the fall already. But one of those things I always look forward to is whenever we get a chance to talk to you. So thank you again for joining us, Nate.
Yeah, thanks, JT.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking more things Utah football. We'll see you then.